This is Studio 809.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. I'm your host, Hiking Bob Falcone, and you can find me on my website at hikingbob.com, which has links to my social media, my columns at the Colorado Springs Independent, other the podcasts we've done, my newsletter that comes out every week, my photography website, all that stuff is at hikingbob.com. And a little hint or little thing I'm working on here. I have if you all may or may not have heard, there's a thing called Substack, which is where journalists go to write articles, especially where a lot of people who lost their jobs in the media have done that. I'm on Substack right now, but as a subscriber. But I'm thinking about moving my newsletter from MailChimp to Substack, which is going to enable me to have a much more control over design, because right now MailChimp's design is terrible. You really can't do much with it. It's going to allow me longer formats. It's also going to allow me that if things go south and I end up not having a newspaper to write for or something like that, to continue my column. So you may see that migrate. Apparently they can have a migrate tool from MailChimp over to Substack, so you won't have to re-sign up. But anyway, something that I'm working on. It may or may not happen. I think what I may do for a while is just have it run on both and see how it looks before I make a decision. And if you've had any experience, if you're a Substack producer or you publish on Substack, drop me a line, let me know how it works, and we'll see how that goes. Today, joining me is, after a very long absence, we've had a lot of guests on the podcast, is Kevin Wild Westendorf. Kevin, it is so good to see you back on the podcast. It's been a very long time since we talked, but we've had a great bunch of guests, but it's always good to have you back on the podcast.
Oh, and it's always great to be back. Because I do really enjoy this. Because as you've known over the years, I could talk about outdoor stuff all day.
Yeah.
So it's just a really fun chance to do that.
If only there was a place you get to do that.
Yeah. But yeah, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Wild Westendorf, and my website, wildwestendorf.com.
Great. Well, Kevin, good to have you back on here. So let's talk about a couple of things. Let's do some catching up for number one. So as most people know, follow me on my social media and the newsletter stuff. I'm in Phoenix and down here for a while, enjoying the warm weather, spring training, baseball, doing some hiking. A little different this year. They had a very dry winter, so there's like no wildflowers to be seen anywhere in the valley. We've had some rain over the last 2 weeks, some of it pretty good amount of rain, so things are greening up, but far too late. Especially we're not going to have any poppies. They need rain like in November and December, and there was none. I think they went 200 days without rain.
Oh, wow.
They went a very long stretch without rain, and during that was that critical time period where the poppies need rain, and that didn't happen. So we're not going to see any poppies this year, or very few, and haven't seen anything at all. But things are looking green, so at the very least it'll be green. But if you're used to seeing me post pictures of a lot of flowers, probably not going to see any of that till I get back home in May. So probably won't see any of that coming around for a little while. Kevin, how have you been doing? What's been going on with you?
Oh, I've been good. So as some of you may know, I got a little interruption in life. A little over a week ago from recording this, I was let go again in a round of layoffs. But I'm feeling much better this time around because now it's not my first rodeo. Where last year I was just kind of like caught off guard because I had been at the same place for almost 8 years, and I just was like it just changed my world. So yeah, I'm feeling much better this time around, but I am definitely going to be taking advantage of the warmer weather because when I was let go last year, it was at the beginning of January. So the timing is a little bit better this time around, with the weather just being consistently warm, which has been really nice. And yeah, that's about it. And when we last talked, I had gotten a Garmin Enduro 3 watch to replace my Apple Watch Pro. And I had when we last talked, I had only had the watch for 2 days, so I didn't really have any testing or experience. One thing I wish Garmin would simplify their device lineup, because they have a ton of watches and a lot of them just have like one feature different or this feature less or one feature more. But then there's a difference of hundreds of dollars between those watches. So it just made it really, really hard to do research to find out which would be the best watch for me. But I'm definitely really, really glad I got this watch. I relearned it from the days I used a Garmin Instinct, and I just love how it's simple. And I think I mentioned last time how I realized I wasn't using a lot of the smart features of the Apple Watch, where the Garmin has just enough smart features, but it's more of a GPS device than a smartwatch. My favorite thing is the battery life. Because on the Apple Watch Pro, if I wasn't doing any hiking, I could maybe get 2 days of battery life out of it. But if I was doing hiking and stuff, that obviously drained the power dramatically. And I realized like I kept getting battery anxiety because it's just kind of like, oh man, it's really draining. Especially I found if I started a hike on a full charge and did 10 or more miles, that's when I would start feeling that like, oh, it's getting low on battery now. The Garmin Enduro has been significantly better with that, where I can go a whole week and do a few hikes plus other like smartwatch stuff on it, and still it's more than half full, which is it's so nice. And when I do charge it, it charges incredibly fast. And so I'm just really, really excited to take it out on big adventures this summer, like the long, long hikes that I haven't done in a while because of all the chaos of last year and stuff. But I think it's a very solid purchase. It's light of the Garmin devices, I think.
But last time we talked, we had you on, we talked about that, and I had been using a Suunto GPS watch, and for me, the GPS watch is a backup because I carry a regular GPS when I go hiking. But
Oh, yeah.
you started talking about the Garmin, and that got me thinking. So I started looking at the Garmin, thinking I'm not really in the market for a new watch, but let me look into them. One of the things, there were two things I didn't like, three things I didn't like about the Suunto. It was an overall great watch. It looked beautiful, worked really well, but a couple of things. One of which was the battery life was only a couple of days, sort of like your Apple Watch. About 2 days, maybe three, and then it would be time to charge it up. Charge up real quick, but it was time to charge up. So it was charging up quite a bit. The GPS worked well, but when I downloaded it, it used a different format than my Garmin, which was harder to download and save, and there was no way around that. And then the other thing was, and this was my biggest beef, was the vibrate feature on it wasn't very robust, and also the tones on it, so I always missed notifications on it. So those three things were things. A couple of things I could work around. The tracking thing, not a big deal. I didn't use it all that much for that part. It was a backup. The battery life, not real bad. I had a Casio before that. You didn't get a day out of it without having to charge. Every night that had to be charged, so that was better. But the notification thing was a big deal. So I started looking at watches. I looked at Garmin, and as it turned out, because it was right around Christmas time, they were on sale. And you know me, Kevin, I'm a tightwad. I don't buy anything at full price unless I absolutely have to.
Yeah.
So what I ended up getting, and I looked at the Instinct like you had, and I liked it, but I ended up getting the Garmin Fenix 7 Pro Sapphire, which is a whole lot of words strung together. And you are right that Garmin has far too many watches and far too many variations of all the watches. So what does the Garmin 7 Pro Sapphire mean? Well, it's the Fenix, it's the Model 7. I forget what the Pro gives you, and Sapphire refers to the glass. It's supposed to be this hard impact resistant glass. I still put a glass protector on it. But I'm loving it. They make the 7X. So just to throw more things in there, which is a bigger diameter watch. But it looked like I look like Flava Flav with a watch hanging off that thing. So no offense to Mr. Flav, but I have a pretty small wrist, and that big honking watch would just look weird on my wrist. I love the Garmin. The format it uses is obviously exactly like the Garmin GPSs I use. So when I download it, it's the exact same format, easy to incorporate with all the other stuff I do. The vibration and the tones for notification are better, and it goes 14 days on a charge. Now, that's
Nice.
not if I'm using it for hiking. Obviously, if you use it for hiking and it's tracking, it's less. But without doing any hiking, it's 2 weeks on a charge, which I love. Plus, this is solar, so it'll also charge while it's in the sun. So while I'm out hiking, it's actually picking up that. So it actually extends it a little bit. Overall, I love the Garmin Watch 2. It was on sale, which is the only reason why I got it. I think it was like $100 or more off of the regular price. These things are still far, I think, my personal opinion, far more expensive than they should be.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So catch them on sale, which they run sales pretty often. You get refurbished models real cheap. But I love my Garmin. I think it's a nice watch. So I kind of took your lead and like, well, let me check the Garmin and went we do a different model than you did. But overall, it's been a good purchase for me. Also, mine will actually check not only heart rate but heart rhythm. It'll
Oh,
actually
same
check
here.
if I
Yeah.
have atrial fibrillation, which fortunately says I don't have. It also tells me I'm dying half the time, which I think is probably wrong. Here's an interesting thing. I did a real hard hike. I did a couple of hard hikes in a row over the last couple of days, a week or so ago. And one day I did a climb. I hiked up Piestewa Peak, which is a pretty tough hike, and did it fast. I was screaming up there, coming back down. And then during the rest of the day, my watch was telling me, you worked hard today and you haven't stopped to take a rest. You need to take a break.
Oh yeah,
Two reactions to that. One is, that's pretty cool. Number two is, you're not my mother.
yeah.
But I liked it. So I'm glad you're having good experience with yours too. I need to do more hiking with mine. I think when my trip to Iceland comes up in a couple of months, I'm not bringing my GPS. I'm traveling light, but I'm going to use the watch if we do any hiking to track my hikes out there. Why do I need the GPS and one more thing to carry, another set of batteries and something else to charge when I can just do it on my watch? Kevin, you want to go into, we kind of passed over. Do you want to go into why it was you ended up losing your job, or is it something you don't want to?
No, that's totally fine. As most of you all would know, there's our major budget cuts from the government on down, and there's tariffs or potential tariffs. So that's going to significantly increase the prices of cars and car parts. And as you know, I work at a dealership in inventory management, and as a company is huge. So to brace for impact for tariffs and the rising cost of cars and parts, they had to cut off a ton of jobs because they're expecting like the average truck price to go up by like 20 grand, which means less people are going to buy them. And with all these people who are losing their jobs, it makes the market so much smaller. So they're just bracing for impact, really.
Well, that's the same. You've been caught up in that, and I'm not going to criticize your bosses or anything. Your former bosses, they're trying to make business decisions and try to stay ahead of things. Seem to me a little early because those tariffs have come and gone and changed. It seemed to me it would have been better to make sense to wait until they actually kicked in.
Yeah, yeah.
But they have a decision to make. They have a business to work on. They have a lot of people working for them. Unfortunately, you were one of them. I hope that you land another job soon. And if anybody is looking for a good, hardworking young man, Kevin is definitely going to be the person for you. So, and he's going to use me as a reference because I told him that we
Yep.
were welcome to do that. And here's his reference. Great guy, hire him. He'll do a lot of good work for you. Anybody listening, if an application from Kevin comes across your desk, here's my recommendation: hire Kevin. You won't be unhappy with that choice. So
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate that.
absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about this budget cutting. There's been a lot of talk about that. That what's been going on. And I wrote a long column in the Indy a couple of weeks ago. I'll relink to that about the effects that this budget cutting has had. I think we could start off with a couple of givens. Number one is almost everybody thinks government is bloated. Everybody thinks that the government is spending more money than they should. Everybody thinks there's a lot of people in government who probably are doing jobs they don't need to be doing, or kind of slacking off their jobs. Some of that may be true. Some of that may be partially true. Some may be hogwash. whatever happens there, we could have, there's places that cut cost in government spending. I think we all get that. Nobody's going to deny that that could happen. Yeah, the problem is that the way they're doing this with these budget cuts is that they are just taking a hatchet, taking a chainsaw, and just cutting jobs just based on the employment status. So if you're probationary, which can mean anything, it doesn't mean your job performance is good. Some people are saying, well, you're probationary, you must not be good at your job. Well, that's not true at all. You got fired. You could have even been, and I didn't know that the federal government did this, which kind of shocked me. You could have been a 25-year government employee, and then you went and got a new position, you promoted or transferred. You're now probationary, even though you've been there forever, and they're going to take you out because you're a probationary employee. Now, where I come from in local government, probationary was somebody who was new to the job. We had probationary firefighters, and they had a year to prove themselves, and sometimes they didn't make it because it wasn't a job for everybody. But sometimes we had people who moved from one city office to another, or one city department to another. They came to the fire department. They were probationary firefighters, but they were not probationary employees necessarily. They still maintained their
I did
years
not
of
know
service.
that.
Yeah, they still maintained their years of service. They still, they still maintained their seniority and things. And it was a little awkward. I mean, they were still low on the totem pole in the fire department, but as far as their time as city employees, they maintained their position there. It was a little two-step thing. Anyway, so this whole thing going on, the problem is that these cuts are being done with very little thought. I mean, they let off firefighters, and then they decided they should bring back firefighters. They stopped hiring firefighters. Now they are rehiring seasonal firefighters. There was an email from the Pike San Isabel National Forest. They are hiring seasonal firefighters. That's a good thing. But it's been just chaotic the way it's going. The Forest Service, BLM, Fish and Wildlife Service, National Park Service have all just seen people just get cut, or jobs that they relied on for people to fill seasonal positions just not happening. For example, a lot of your busier national parks are also not very busy in the winter, which kind of makes sense. When do people go on vacation? They go on vacation from right about now through to September typically. So they don't hire people year round because they may not need all those people year round. As an example of being responsible hiring, they hire seasonal employees. Well, they just decide, well, we don't need to hire these seasonal, temporary, probationary, whatever you want to call them, employees. Well, these are the extra people that some of these national parks and national forests rely on to man up, staff up for the increases in usage. The more people who show up, the more visitors who show up, all that stuff is there. But they've elected, well, we're just not going to hire all these people. But you need them. There's more and more people out there. Here's something I found out the other day. The Colorado Sun ran an article that said the National Park Service overall saw a huge increase in visitors last year, but they've hidden that data so deep in their website that it's almost impossible to find it because they don't want you to know that they actually need all these seasonal people that they hire, or these temporary people that they usually hire. They buried the information so deep that if you couldn't find it, you could say, well, we probably don't need all these people. But in actuality, they do. So it's creating chaos all across the board. It's being done without rhyme or reason. The vice president the other day said that nobody wants people working for them who doesn't pull their weight, who doesn't show up, who doesn't do their job, who doesn't, perform well. Yeah, you know what? You're right. When I was on the fire department, we certainly did not want firefighters who did not pull their weight. Nobody wants people who show up and don't do any work. They use that as justification for all these layoffs. The problem is that's not who they're laying off. They are just taking the axe to people who are unprotected, so to speak, and not paid. And then they say on their paperwork, by the way, you're being fired for your job performance when these people can prove that their job performance evaluations have been top notch and they've been there for years. So they could say that all they want. And if that was really what they were doing, if they were pulling people's performance reports and pulling people's job records and saying, you know what, you've got poor reviews over the last couple of years. You've barely made, the median level. We're going to get you out of here, bring in somebody who wants to do a job. It would suck, but it wouldn't be so bad. But that's not what they're doing. So they're being very dishonest about what they're doing there. It is just slashing it. I don't know how things are going to go, how things are going to look this year. There's a lot of news reports out. There's a lot of reports out there about how many positions haven't been filled. It's very confusing. There's nothing official. Nobody wants to talk. When I wrote my article for the Indy, I wrote to Mesa Verde National Park. I wrote to Rocky Mountain National Park. I wrote to Great Sand Dunes National Park. I said, tell me how many people you're not hiring and how many people you laid off. None of them would reply. They told me to talk to the people in Washington, D.C. People in Washington, D.C. didn't reply for almost 10 days after the article had already come out. And I emailed them like a week before I wrote the article. And then they finally said, well, we're just hiring people. No answer. It was a non-answer answer, nothing specific, couldn't answer any questions. What the fallback on this is going to be is this is going to fall back to us, you, me, the person listening to this, to really up our game on being responsible users of these parks. Because here's the problem. If you look at the Instagram feed, the Tourons of Yellowstone, which is it's a conglomeration of tourist and moron, where people doing stupid stuff like going and poking a buffalo or an elk or a moose or something, and then getting stomped on because they're doing something stupid. More of that stuff is going to happen because there's going to be less people out there, official people out there, to stop that from happening. And I'm not saying we need to get into fights with people about it, but there's going to be more need for, if anything else, peer pressure in the form of setting a good example to kind of keep that check. I want to go to national parks. I'm looking forward to visiting national parks this year. I want to go to places I haven't been to, but I think it's going to be a little chaotic unless somebody wakes up. Now there have been a couple of judges who have ruled that these firings were illegal and they need to bring these people back. But of course, some of these people have no longer want the job. Some of these people have gone and found other jobs. This ruling might get appealed, so they may not want to come back because the administration might appeal it, and then they lose their jobs again. Who wants to go through all that kind of garbage? I don't know. Here's the other thing, and this is not good for example, for you, Kevin. Some people are saying, well, these are government workers and they don't need their jobs, and good for them, being pretty rude about it. Those government workers are now going to be on the job market looking for other jobs that are not government jobs. So if you're looking for a job and you're happy that these government workers are no longer employed, they're going to be looking for the same job you're going to be looking for.
Yep.
Guess what? They've got great resumes and great records and great training. So again, what did my mom always tell me? Be careful what you ask for.
And what's really frustrating is our national parks and the Forest Service and all that have already been really understaffed and underfunded for decades. And I remember a famous example of when there was that government shutdown and Joshua Tree National Park got trashed because people were going off trail and four-wheeling and stuff, just destroying plant life and destroying the trails. I remember seeing pictures of garbage cans at national parks just overflowing with trash. Plus, it underscores the economic benefit these parks bring to the surrounding areas also. Like a part of why Estes Park gets so much revenue is because of Rocky Mountain. And I'm sure it's the same for Alamosa outside of Great Sand Dunes or Cortez outside of Mesa Verde. And I am afraid, but I have seen posts where people are saying that they're going to start bringing like a little trash bag. And as they hike out, they're just going to fill that bag up and it's just going to become a part of their regular thing. I usually try to bring a trash bag anyway, because especially in the city parks, because there tends to be like a lot of people, and you just find a lot of junk up there. But yeah, it's really gonna have to be put on our shoulders to be responsible outdoors or outside until this whole mess is over with, or it might get worse. Who knows?
Absolutely. I was at Joshua Tree during that last shutdown. I was there like a week after it shut down, and they had managed to get some people in there to kind of clean it up. But it was definitely a mess there. Here's the other part of that. You mentioned the economic benefit, like the adjoining towns. And interestingly, the Explore Act, which was just passed, required the Forest Service, the Park Service, and BLM that had recreational lands to work with the communities next to their recreational lands to help them be able to support the visitors coming in with whether it was traffic issues or infrastructure like bathrooms and stuff like that. All that's kind of gone out the window now because there's nobody to do it. And one more thing, not only is it you and I, just we, or the family that goes there, there are businesses like river rafting companies, like hunting groups that require permits on federal lands to go and run their business. That not only is a business that supports part of the local economy, but also when those groups go out there, they're making sure the people that hire them are acting in a safe and responsible manner. There is a shortage of people now to give them their permits, which they're required to do so they can carry out their business on the federal lands. So it's not just as easy as saying, well, we've got 14, I'm pulling a number out of my butt. We got 14,000 people, let's cut 4,000 of them. Well, is there some excess number of people there? Probably. Is there 4,000 of them? No. They're not doing this in a surgical manner at all. They're doing this with a sledgehammer, a chainsaw, a hatchet, whatever you want to call it. And that's the problem with the way they're doing it. They're not cutting people who aren't performing well. They're just cutting people because they just happen to be in the way. And I don't think anybody should be in favor of that. If you want to cut the people who are doing crappy work and not showing up or not pulling your weight, cut those people. I'm okay with that. And hire replacements. Hire the people who can do the job better. You get more bang out of your buck that way than relying on other people to fill in for them. But it's just kind of nutty. And I don't know that I see a light at the end of the tunnel, unfortunately, Kevin. But maybe there will be. I think there's going to be a lot of litigation.
Honestly, I do remember last time Trump was in charge. There was a lot of things he tried to do in the 4 years that he just could not because of the judges and stuff and lawsuits and everything. So I hope that's more successful this time around. So he can't cause as much economic damage as he plans to.
Well, let's hope for our judicial system to do its job in a fair and impartial manner, and an equal part of our government system. Three equal
Yeah.
parts. So hopefully that carries on. So Kevin, let's move on to one other topic here. As you know, e-bikes, electronic bikes, has been an issue in Colorado Springs for a while. In my 6 years on the TOPS working committee, it was an issue with us because the TOPS ordinance specifically said that motorized vehicles were not allowed on TOPS properties, which was different than other parks properties. It's a very confusing mess, especially if you look at it from the outside in. I was on the inside, it was confusing. But Colorado Springs is now allowing e-bikes in a graduated manner as they evaluate the properties and the trails, and there's other legal things they have to work through. One of my concerns early on when they were talking about e-bikes off-road on trails was that what would happen with somebody who got, they had this electronically assist. So instead of them pedaling way back in the forest, and maybe they couldn't because they didn't have the strength or the stamina to do it, their e-bike got them way back up someplace, and then their battery dies on their e-bike. It was a concern of mine. Being a first responder and having talked and worked with search and rescue people, it was a concern. How do you go out and get this person? And an e-bike is not like your really lightweight mountain bike. An e-bike weighs 50, 60 pounds. They're heavy. Of course, you can still pedal an e-bike. And if you're uphill, you can pedal it down. You can still pedal an e-bike, but you're pedaling something a lot heavier. So imagine my surprise, or whatever you want to call it, when I pull up a newsletter from Out There, Colorado over the weekend, and it had a headline in their newsletter, woman has to be rescued after her e-bike battery dies. And this happened in Big Bend Ranch State Park. Yes, Big Bend Ranch State Park. And they quoted a Facebook post from this group. It said, it's a mountain biker paradise. E-bike. Now, e-bikes, for one thing, are not allowed in this state park, regardless. E-bikes may sound like a good idea, and I'm going to read their Facebook post, which Out There, Colorado said, look at this, e-bikes ended up in this disaster. E-bikes may sound like a good idea to make your adventure a little easier, but in the backcountry, they're downright dangerous. Recently, a biker was rescued in Big Bend Ranch State Park because her e-bike battery died. She was in the desert for 30 hours and pushed her e-bike 20 miles. Think about that for a minute. Can that really happen? Before she was located deep in the park interior. If you can't ride it without the assistance of an electric motor, please keep it out of the park and off the trails. Now, this was posted March 11th, and there's a note at the bottom that it actually happened back in November. The biker was recovered safely. So it sounds like my concern. Somebody used their e-bike, they got way back up there, the battery died, oh my God, what a disaster, somebody had to go rescue this person. Except, of course, the devil is in the details. Here's what really happened, and it is nothing like what they say happened. This is a news release, official media statement from Texas Parks and Wildlife, Big Bend Ranch State Park, search and rescue in November of 2024. And it says, this person, no, I'm not going to name her, had been lost at Big Bend Ranch State Park for over 30 hours and been located alive and well 20 miles from the point she was last seen. Her husband left on a, soon after her husband left to bike one of the trails on the morning of November 26th, this woman decided to try to catch up to him. She was unable to. Upon reaching a crossroads in the trail, she took the wrong trail. After getting a flat tire on her bike, she opted to leave it behind. She ended up walking in a circle for 5 hours, eventually coming upon the bike again. She decided to take it with her and continue walking the trail system until she reached a ranger station located in the interior of the park. From there, search and rescue crews were notified of her location. She was safely reunited with her family. And they go back to talk about how there was a large search for her. They searched for it until they were no longer able to do so, probably because of darkness. They used various methods to find her, but apparently, eventually, the U.S. Border Patrol was involved, the Sheriff's Office, Department of Public Safety, Aircraft, El Paso Fire Department, Search and Rescue Team. A lot of people were involved in this thing. Now, there obviously were a lot of things that went wrong here. Number one is that, what do we always say? If you get lost, don't wander around. Stay put. You're easier to find than a moving target. But what's not in there? It wasn't an e-bike. Her battery didn't go dead because it wasn't an e-bike. She had a flat tire. She did not push the bike for 20 miles. She was 20 miles away from where she started, but she did not push the bike for 20 miles. So all this stuff, this fear factor about e-bike and battery dying and pushed an e-bike, I'm trying to picture anybody pushing a 50-pound bike for 20 miles. None of that stuff happened. So this is a matter of not even the slightest bit of journalistic integrity, not the slightest bit of fact-checking. And by the way, I went and looked at every news release Texas Park and Wildlife did from the day we're recording this all the way back to make sure there were no updates. I didn't miss any updates, and maybe there was an e-bike and it was a battery. Nothing new. This is the final word on this thing. No e-bike, no dead battery, no pushing the bike 20 miles. My point is, there's a lot of misinformation out there. Facebook has decided they're no longer going to have fact checkers, which means there's no longer fact checkers on Instagram. Twitter got rid of fact checkers. Nobody's fact checking anything. It's incumbent upon us, especially me in the media business, journalist business, to fact check things. That they ran with this erroneous Facebook post from this organization. I mean, you would think it'd be accurate, but you still have to check everything and make a big deal about how e-bike batteries cause this woman to push her bike 20 miles in a search and rescue operation. None of it is true. It is simply a flat tire and a person who, to be honest with you, probably rode past their abilities and also didn't follow one of the basic rules of search and rescue, which when you're lost, stop moving. Stay still. Of course, one of the other things that didn't happen there. Probably didn't tell anybody where they were. Probably didn't have any communications with them. Personal locator beacons, you carry them, I carry them. All these other things that we can talk about that went wrong. But an e-bike and a dead battery had nothing to do with this. Not one thing to do about this. This is a piece of sensationalism, yellow journalism that they promoted without the slightest bit of fact checking. And I've been looking at their Facebook page. They haven't done any updates on it, even though that Facebook post from that friends group at Big Bend Ranch State Park, there are numerous comments on there that it's not right with links to the same news release I just read. So it's a bit disappointing. I've had my beef with them anyway because I don't think they do a real great job on journalism there. But just one more example of how it's just shoddy journalism.
And they're well known doing a lot of fear mongering. Like they'll even post a lot about stuff that has nothing to do with the outdoors, just to like scare people. And even when they talk about upcoming weather, they'll say like Denver area is going to get 40 inches of snow. And it turns out like it's not the Denver area. They're talking about like further into the mountains, like Aspen and stuff. And it's also egregious because, yeah, like it makes people afraid of things that they shouldn't be afraid of. Instead of being an educational, informational outlet, they have to fearmonger about e-bikes. And they've been like this since I started to read them.
And to be fair, I still have concerns about people who ride their e-bikes further than they probably should.
Oh, yeah,
They have a battery that goes dead, and are they able to get themselves back out of there? But be honest with you, every once in a while, I'll do a web search to find out if that's actually happened. And I think I've maybe found one over the last couple of years, and out of the millions of e-bikes that are probably out there. So it's probably more common, to be honest with you, that the rescue of a cyclist is going to be a traditional cyclist, like in this case, having a flat tire or breaking a chain and not having a spare or a patch kit or a chain repair kit with them is probably more likely what's going to happen than an e-bike battery going dead. Because like I said, you can still pedal an e-bike. Now, is it going to be as easy? No, obviously not. They're heavier. They're not necessarily, I won't say they're not necessarily designed to be pedaled without a battery, but obviously they're designed to be pedaled with the assistance of a battery. And all that electronics and mechanism in there. It's just disappointing that they decided to just make a big deal about that. Obviously not the slightest bit of fact checking the thing at all. Just because it was posted by the friends group of that state park does not mean that it's accurate. And probably somebody there who went rogue and has a beef about e-bikes and got PO'd about it said, let me make this thing into a bigger deal than it is. And it's not the case at all. Kevin, got some good interviews coming up, I think, over the next couple of weeks. One of our frequent guests on the podcast, Mandy Horvath, who we all know and has done some tremendous things as a double amputee, climbing the Manitou Incline, then Pikes Peak, then Mount Kilimanjaro, has just appeared. She spent last summer doing the series Naked and Afraid, which is now out. We're working on getting her on the podcast, and hopefully we'll have that on in a couple of weeks and talk about her progression with that. It's a pretty fascinating story. We've had some conversation. I think we're in the process of scheduling that, and that should hopefully be on pretty soon. But she's been on the podcast a lot, and hopefully have her back on here and talk about her experience with that. Kevin, do you have anything else you want to talk about before we go?
Not really, but I was reminded of something when you mentioned how your watch when you did that tough hike and your watch said like okay, you need to rest. A while ago, I had too much cold brew coffee, and I was sitting down on my recliner, and my watch actually alerted to me saying that your heart rate is way higher than normal. So I had to be like, oh, that was okay. I should probably watch that better. But yeah,
A little less caffeine, Kevin.
yeah.
I do energy drinks. I'm not a coffee drinker. I do energy drinks, and I haven't had it tell me that. What's interesting is it checks my heart rate all the time, and I gotta say I'm pretty impressed. My resting heart rate floats right around 49 to 52. Um,
It's
for
about
an,
mine too.
for an
Yeah.
old fart like me, that's not bad. And today, when we're recording this, I did a pretty hard hike. A lot of uphill, a lot of elevation gain in 2 miles. And when I wasn't, staring at my watch the whole time, but I think the highest my heart rate was around 145. And considering
Oh
I was
wow.
wearing a pack, really tough uphill, I felt pretty good about that. So for an old guy like me, one foot in the grave and the other one on a banana peel, it's probably not so shabby. I'm kidding. I'm fine. I'm fine. Don't anybody get worried. I'm fine. I feel pretty. It's pretty cool having that data available.
Yeah, yeah. It's just fun to go through it all because I go on the app to look at the data, and it's just fun to see.
Pretty cool. Well, Kevin, I think that's all we got for today. Thanks again for being on here. I'm hoping we don't go so long before we have you on here again. But with the twice a month format, we're doing fewer to begin with. But I think the good part about that is the ones we do, whether it's you and me or whether it's with guests, have been really great podcasts. And I think overall that's made it a better podcast. The feedback I'm getting has been very good. So, and everybody out there, remember too, you can help support this podcast. If you like what you hear, whether it's me and Kevin just chatting or whether it's with a interview with a guest, if you like what you hear, please help support this podcast at Patreon, patreon.com/hikingbob, and you can support this podcast. And depending on your level of support, maybe you can get a nice reward in the mail once a month. So please take a look at that. Kevin, anything else before we go?
Nope, I think I'm good.
All right. With that, everybody will say thanks for listening to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast.
We'll talk to you later.